Well, it's time now for perspective. We're increasingly aware of the challenges faced by the transgender community and the psychological distress experienced by those whose gender identity doesn't fit with the body they were born with. But how should society and also the medical community treat children who start showing signs of gender dysphoria? Is early intervention the ethical option, or does it simply lock children into a choice they may later be unable to reverse? Well, to discuss all that and more, I'm joined on set now by Sahar Sadjadi, a medical doctor and anthropologist. She's also a fellow at the Paris Institute for Advanced Study, specialised in children and gender. Thank you very much indeed for coming on to speak to us here on France 24. Now, there are, of course, some girls who exhibit typically feminine traits, boys who behave in a way that society deems traditionally masculine, but there's also a huge range of behaviour between those two. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, as you mentioned, there has been always in different societies and historically children who have more or less conformed or not conformed to gender norms assigned to them by adults, basically. And of course, children have their own culture and they also produce their own gender norms and follow those. They can be playful about it. They can sometimes be very rigid about it. For example, children can even in different stages of development think that, let's say, having long or short hair is what makes you a boy or a girl. So these, and then there are different developmental stages where they can relate it to body parts. So, and these norms, of course, vary, and there's a lot of cross-cultural study that shows that they're not the same in different societies. Even historically, when you look at, for example, what now in the United States, where I did my research, is very much ruling children's lives is like color pink and blue as a gendered color. But this has only been happening since the 1940s, and it was a decision made by some department stores. So, as you know, these norms are shifting, and some children don't abide by them. And it has always been the case, at least in contemporary era, that there has been more tolerance for girls who show masculine traits than the other way around. So the whole clinical field that has developed around children's gender issues, gender troubles, since the 1960s in the US again, which is where I mostly done my study, has been for decades very much centered around feminine boys. It has shifted in the last few years, and there's more children are brought to clinics who were assigned as a girl when they were born, who are either showing masculine interest or want to be a boy. So this has been a little bit shifting, but the whole clinical field has very much been built around the issue of boys who show feminine interests and behaviors or want to be girls.
And how common would you say it is for a child, not a young child, but a slightly older child, to say that they feel different from the body that they were born in? How common is that phenomenon?
We really don't have reliable statistics to say it's common. I think it's quite common for children to have different, at different stages in their childhood, express either dissatisfaction with certain aspects of their gender role or identity. Sometimes it's periodical and it's, you know, it can be a few days, could be a few months. Sometimes it lasts for some children, and they get very invested in really not wanting to live as a girl or a boy as they have been assigned at birth. And you know, this is very gender. It might sound trivial to people, children's gender and gender, but it's not, and it's really, really omnipresent in their life, and it shapes their social relations profoundly. Like nowadays, all objects they come into contact with they have to choose whether they're boy or girl. So this can, in long term, for children, for all children, but especially those who don't conform to these norms, create stress, and also people react to them with a lot of anguish. People are deeply invested in children's gender as a way to protect what they think is a sort of conventional social order. So some of the children really face a lot of problems in their lives, including harassment, bullying from other children and adults. And therefore, I think it's important to think about the question of children and gender and how we have created a society for them that really makes it difficult not to be either of those or want to change across the gender categories.
So you are, of course, an anthropologist, but you're also a medically trained doctor. What are the various ways in which the medical community treats children who feel that they've been essentially born in the wrong body?
Previously, the clinical field tried to basically change their behaviors so that they would conform to the gender that was assigned to them at birth. For example, they would try to discourage cross-gender behavior or interest, like even point to the child where they saw, let's say for boys, girly gestures, and also remove the toys and clothes of the other sex. But this has shifted around the late 1990s, early 2000s. A new approach that was called affirmative approach developed, which didn't believe that children's, what was called at the time gender identity disorder, is really a mental illness, and they thought that this is a natural variation in childhood development and we should let it develop and grow without disparaging their behaviors or any potential adult outcome in terms of gender and sexuality. More recently, there are now even medical treatments for children who want to transition, and these are children who very strongly desire to live as the other gender. And these are very new treatments. They're still being debated. And of course, when it comes to medical treatment for young children who cannot really fully understand the consequences, health consequences of the treatments, the medical community is cautious how to make decisions around these issues.
Because there's a very real risk, of course, that early medical intervention will not be able to be reversed later on after puberty, for example.
Yes, and I think there's, for example, for younger children, prepubertal children, the only medical treatment used is a treatment called puberty suppression. And the idea is that you only put puberty on hold so that children have more time to think about it. But also, I think many clinicians have had in their mind that, if the children don't go through puberty, later transition is easier if their body has not developed secondary sexual characteristics. As we know, puberty is a very systemic growth phase, and it's not just secondary sexual characteristics, and the whole body and various organs develop and mature. And so we still really don't fully know the consequences of such interventions. But of course, for example, allowing children to transition, meaning change their name, pronouns, clothes, does not have to entail medical treatment. And also doesn't necessarily mean that they will end up in future transgender, and there's no evidence that it is actually harmful to children to socially transition, even if they change their mind later. So I think the debate has become, so I think we have to separate these issues. There's not only one form of transition. Even within adult transgender community, there's a diversity of experiences. Some people don't even use medical intervention. Some people do different degrees of that. And I think when thinking about children, we should also keep in mind that the future is open for them. And in fact, new even categories emerge. For example, in the last few years, we see increasingly young people who identify as non-binary, who are refusing to be either or. And this, who knows in 20 years from now, when some of the children of today are adults, what kind of ways of being and categories of gender and sexuality they will create.
Absolutely.
Themselves.
I'm so sorry. I've got to stop you there. We've run out of time. Thank you so much. A fascinating and highly controversial topic. Sahar Sadjadi, medical doctor and also anthropologist. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to us here on France 24.